Close the door. Sit down. Listen carefully. What you're about to receive is the cold, unfiltered truth about how the world actually works, not the sanitized version handed to you at every stage of life, not the version comfortable people around you have chosen to believe. The real version, the version the powerful have always known and the weak have always ignored. Last week, I watched a man lose a negotiation he should have won. He had the better product. He had the better price. He had every logical advantage, but the other person walked out with everything, and this man walked out with nothing. Why? Because logic wasn't the game being played. Emotion was, and he didn't even know the rules of the actual game happening right in front of him. This happens every single day, in every arena of life. In every room you'll ever walk into, someone is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Someone is operating on a different level of awareness, a different depth of strategic thinking, a completely different set of rules. And that person wins every time. 5 centuries ago, Niccolo Machiavelli sat in exile, stripped of his position, removed from power, cast out, and wrote the most controversial, most feared, and most secretly admired book ever written about power. Leaders banned it, churches condemned it, kings kept it hidden beneath their pillows at night, because it told the truth, not the comfortable truth, the cold, calculated, brutal truth about what separates those who control their circumstances from those who are controlled by them. Today, I'm giving you 9 principles drawn from that cold wisdom, 9 ways of thinking that will permanently shift how you see people, situations, and yourself. 9 mental frameworks that will transform you from someone who reacts to the world into someone who reads the world before it even moves. Before we begin, understand this. This knowledge is neutral. It is a blade. How you use it defines who you are. The goal is not to become heartless. The goal is to become clear-eyed, not cruel, precise, not cold toward people, cold toward illusions. Are you ready to stop being surprised by a world that was always this way? Then let's begin. Number 1. The cold eye. Here is the single most expensive mistake most people make in life. They see people as they want them to be instead of as they actually are. You want your ally to be trustworthy, so you ignore the 3 times he bent the truth to his advantage. You want your associate to be loyal, so you explain away the way he disappeared when you needed him most. You want to believe in the goodness of someone standing in front of you, so you construct elaborate justifications for patterns that are screaming the truth directly at your face. This is not kindness. This is willful blindness, and it costs people everything: time, money, energy, peace of mind, and years of their life that cannot be recovered. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend decades refusing to accept. People are primarily motivated by self-interest. Not all the time, not in every situation, but at the critical moments, the moments that actually matter, self-interest is almost always the dominant force. This doesn't mean people are evil. It means people are human. Humans protect themselves, advance themselves, and preserve themselves above all else. This is not a flaw. It is simply reality. The question is whether you understand this reality or choose to pretend it doesn't exist. The man who operates with a cold eye doesn't become cynical. He becomes accurate. He stops being shocked when people act in their own interest. He stops being wounded when someone chooses their advantage over his. He stops rebuilding trust that cold logic told him was already broken. Here is how the cold eye functions in practice. Watch what people do, not what they say. Words cost absolutely nothing. Anyone can claim they're loyal, honest, reliable. But actions under pressure, actions when it actually costs them something, that is where character lives or dies. A person who tells you they're trustworthy and then behaves untrustworthily is not a mystery. They are information. Process it, file it, never be surprised by it again. Look for patterns, not exceptions. One incident can be an accident. Two might be coincidence. Three incidents is a pattern, and a pattern is character revealing itself clearly. When someone reveals themselves through consistent behavior, believe them. Not the version of them you prefer. Them. Separate your emotional preference from your strategic analysis. You can like someone and still recognize they're unreliable. You can respect someone and still understand they cannot be trusted with certain things. Your feelings about someone are not evidence of who that person is. They are evidence of who you want that person to be. There is an enormous difference between those two things. The cold eye is not about searching for the worst in people. It is about being an accurate observer of what is actually there. Some people will reveal themselves to be genuinely trustworthy, deeply loyal, consistent under pressure. When the cold eye finds those people, it recognizes them immediately and holds them close. But the cold eye never confuses what it hopes to find with what the evidence actually shows. See clearly, see coldly, see accurately. Because a man who sees the world as it is can navigate it effectively and build something that lasts. A man who sees the world as he wishes it were will spend his entire life being surprised by the obvious and paying for that surprise with everything he builds. Number 2, respond, never react. Every single day, someone is going to try to pull an emotional reaction out of you. Maybe it's a colleague who takes a subtle shot at your work in a group setting. Maybe it's someone who says something disrespectful when others are watching. Maybe it's a competitor who makes a deliberate move designed to destabilize your confidence. And in that moment, something ancient and automatic in your brain wants to react immediately, to defend, to retaliate, to prove yourself. This impulse is your enemy, not because defending yourself is wrong, but because reactive decisions are almost never your best decisions. The person who made you angry already knew that. They were counting on it from the start. Machiavelli called this the trap of predictability. When your opponents know how to make you move, they control you. When your challengers know exactly which button produces which reaction, they own your behavior without even trying. The most dangerous man in any room is the one who cannot be predicted, because no trap can be effectively set for a man whose next move remains unknown. The calculated pause is the space between what happens to you and what you consciously decide to do about it. In that pause lives all your power. When someone challenges you publicly and you immediately fire back, you've handed them exactly what they came for: your composure. You've shown everyone in that room that they have the ability to shake you. When someone challenges you publicly and you offer a slow, calm, unmoved look and choose your response with full deliberation, you've shown everyone that you cannot be easily moved. You've demonstrated a level of self-control that most people find deeply unsettling. And you've left the person who came at you wondering what you're actually thinking, which is far more powerful than anything you could have said in the heat of that moment. The calculated pause works in every arena. In negotiations, the side that shows urgency first almost always concedes the most. Let silence sit in the room. Let the other person fill the space with concessions they never planned to offer. In confrontations, the person who escalates first surrenders the moral high ground immediately. Respond with proportional, deliberate calm. Let them look unreasonable while you appear completely certain. In competition, the person who reveals their full strategy out of excitement loses the element of surprise. Hold back, observe, choose your moment. Practice this starting today. When something makes you want to react immediately, don't. Take 3 full breaths. Ask yourself 2 questions. What outcome do I actually want here? And what response is most likely to produce that outcome? The answer almost never involves acting on the first emotion that rises in your chest. Train the pause. Make it instinctive. Because the man who has mastered the pause has mastered himself completely. And the man who has mastered himself cannot be mastered by anyone else. Number 3. The information advantage. Knowledge is not power. That phrase gets repeated so often that people stopped examining whether it's actually true. Knowledge that your opponent doesn't know you have, that is power. The person who demonstrates everything they know immediately is transparent. And transparent people are easily read, easily predicted, and easily outmaneuvered. The person who holds their knowledge carefully reveals it strategically and lets others believe they have the information advantage while quietly knowing far more. That person operates with real, sustained leverage. Machiavelli was obsessed with this principle. In every negotiation, every alliance, every conflict he analyzed, the decisive advantage almost always went to the side with superior information about the other side's true intentions, capabilities, and limits. Here is how to build your information advantage. Ask questions, don't make statements. The person who speaks constantly reveals their thinking, priorities, anxieties, and limitations in every sentence. The person who asks thoughtful, precise questions learns everything significant about the other person while giving away almost nothing about themselves. In every exchange, the listener holds more real information than the talker. Use this asymmetry constantly. Observe before you engage. When you enter a new environment, there is tremendous social pressure to establish yourself quickly. Resist this completely. Spend the first period watching. Learn the actual power dynamics, which are almost never what the formal structure suggests. Identify who truly influences outcomes versus who simply holds a title. Then, when you do engage, you do so with a complete map that nobody else possesses. Protect your own information with precision. Not everything needs to be shared. Not everyone deserves access to your plans, your vulnerabilities, or your ambitions. The person who shares everything with everyone gives everyone equal ammunition to use against them when circumstances change. Be selective. Choose what you reveal, who receives it, and the exact moment that maximizes your position. Study people in the moments they believe are unguarded. How does someone treat people who hold no power over them? How do they behave when things go wrong and they think the consequences won't reach them? These unguarded moments reveal character with a clarity that no formal interaction ever achieves. The information advantage doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you aware. And awareness, real, accurate, cold-eyed awareness, is the foundation of every effective decision you will ever make. Know more than they think you know. Show less than you actually possess. Number 4, the force of consistency. There are 2 kinds of predictability. One destroys your power, the other builds it into something formidable. Emotional predictability, where people know exactly which buttons produce which reactions from you, makes you controllable. Easy to outmaneuver because your moves can be anticipated and exploited. Excellence predictability, where people know that whatever you commit to, you will deliver without exception, builds something money cannot purchase. An unshakable reputation for reliability that precedes you into every room you enter. Machiavelli understood that a leader's greatest enduring asset is not their brilliance in extraordinary moments, but their absolute consistency in ordinary ones. The leader who is erratic, sometimes generous, sometimes harsh, sometimes engaged, sometimes absent, creates anxiety in everyone around him. Nobody can trust any single interaction, and without trust, no real loyalty forms. Without loyalty, power is always fragile and always one crisis away from collapse. The leader who is coldly consistent, whose standards never shift when things get difficult, who delivers on Monday exactly what he promised on Friday, who holds the same line under pressure that he holds when everything is comfortable, creates an entirely different atmosphere when what people are dealing with is always excellent. Genuine respect forms not because it was demanded, but because it was earned through repetition. Consistency is the most underrated discipline available to you. The person who works hard when they feel motivated and disappears when they don't will never build anything that lasts. Motivation rises and falls based on conditions outside your control. Discipline functions regardless of how you feel on a given morning. The people who consistently build things worth having are almost never the most talented people in their field. They are the most consistent. Choose your non-negotiables with total clarity. The things you will do regardless of how you feel, regardless of circumstances, regardless of whether anyone is watching. These non-negotiables become the actual foundation of your identity, not the identity you claim, but the identity you build through repeated action. And here is the hidden power inside consistency. When you are consistently excellent in everything visible, your occasional deliberate deviation from pattern becomes enormously impactful. The person who is always calm can deliver one moment of absolute cold certainty that stops an entire room. The person who consistently delivers can make one bold move that permanently reframes how everyone understands what they're capable of. Consistency creates contrast, and contrast is where real power lives. Number 5, the economy of trust. Most people have a trust problem, not because they trust too little, but because they trust indiscriminately. They give equal access and equal vulnerability to people who have offered completely different levels of evidence that they deserve any of it. The result is a life filled with people who know too much about your situation, owe too little in return, and hold every incentive to act against your interests when doing so serves them. Think of trust as a finite and genuinely valuable resource. The more broadly you spread it without discrimination, the thinner and more meaningless it becomes everywhere you've placed it. The more precisely you concentrate it in people who have demonstrated through consistent behavior under real pressure that they deserve it, the stronger and more valuable each connection becomes. Here is the framework. There are people you work alongside, functional connections valuable within their proper scope, but they don't receive access to your real vulnerabilities or private strategic thinking. There are people you know with genuine familiarity, real history and warmth, but shared history is not equivalent to proven loyalty when something actually costs someone. There are people who have proven themselves through repeated behavior across genuinely high-stakes situations. People who had real options to choose differently and chose to stand firm. These are rare. These deserve your deepest investment. The other side of the economy of trust, the side most people skip, is the standard you hold for yourself as the foundation. Demanding everything from yourself means becoming the most reliable, consistent, and trustworthy person in your own life first. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Hold yourself to a standard that operates independently of whether anyone is observing. Treat your own word to yourself as genuinely sacred, because if you cannot trust yourself, no external architecture of trust you build means anything real. Build trust carefully. Place it precisely. Earn it daily, from yourself first, from others second. Number 6. The power of positioning. Most people respond to circumstances after those circumstances have already formed around them. A much smaller number position themselves to shape circumstances before they fully arrive. Positioning is the discipline of placing yourself, your reputation, your capabilities, your connections, your resources, in the right configuration before an opportunity appears or a crisis strikes. It looks like luck from the outside because the preparation happened before the moment became visible to observers. Machiavelli wrote with deep attention about the relationship between preparation and what he called fortune, the unpredictable forces of chance. He was never naive about fortune's real power, but his observation was precise. Fortune consistently favors those who have already prepared a position from which to act on it. Fortune just as consistently destroys those who have built no position from which to respond. The flood comes every year to the same valley. The man who built his position on the hill because he understood the pattern is completely fine when the water rises. The man who built in the floodplain because it was easier loses everything. Both men face the exact same flood. Preparation is the only real difference. Positioning works across every domain. Competitive positioning means building your capabilities, network, and reputation, so you're already recognized as excellent before a critical opportunity becomes available. The person who begins building their position after they realize they need it is already significantly behind. Strategic positioning means being absolutely clear about your values, standards, and limits before those things are tested under pressure. The man who has already decided how he will respond to a serious challenge, in the calm moment before any such challenge has appeared, will respond with infinitely more effectiveness than the man who tries to figure it out in real time. Tactical positioning means understanding where a situation is heading before it gets there. Most people react to where things currently are. The strategically positioned person is already thinking from where things will be. Every single day, ask yourself where you want to stand in 1 year, in your capabilities, your competitive position, your prepared resources, and ask what positioning move you need to make today. Then execute that one concrete action, not dramatic gestures, small, precise directional movements that accumulate over time into an advantageous position that nobody else thought to occupy early. Number 7. The strategic retreat. Here is a truth that every proud man needs to hear. There are moments when the single most powerful move available to you is to deliberately step back, not to surrender, not to give up, but to strategically yield specific ground in order to preserve your full strength for the war when the battle in front of you isn't worth the true cost of winning it. Machiavelli studied the great commanders throughout history with obsessive attention to this principle. He noticed a consistent pattern. The commanders who achieved the most decisive, most enduring victories were almost never the ones who fought every engagement with maximum force. They were the ones who had the cold discipline to know which engagements to fight and which to deliberately avoid. The commander drawn into every battle, who meets every challenge with equal fury, who refuses to yield on any point regardless of its strategic value. This commander exhausts his resources on small conflicts that decide nothing. He wins individual battles and loses the entire war through accumulated depletion. The commander who chooses his engagements with cold precision preserves everything that matters. He yields terrain that costs him little while saving his full strength for ground that actually determines the final outcome. The strategic retreat applies in every arena. When someone tries to goad you into an argument that carries no real stakes, stepping back is not weakness. It is intelligence operating correctly. The argument isn't worth winning because winning it costs you time and energy without producing anything of genuine value. When any investment of your resources is clearly not going to produce the return that justifies the continued cost, the ability to step back and redirect those resources towards something viable is not failure. It is strategic correction. The sunk cost of what you've already put in is never a valid reason to continue. When you face opposition with significantly greater current resources, direct confrontation often produces avoidable losses. A strategic retreat, followed by deliberate repositioning and a return from a stronger angle at a better moment, frequently produces outcomes that the direct charge never could have achieved. The core discipline is separating your ego from your strategy completely. Ego insists on holding every position because yielding any ground feels like diminishment. Strategy asks only one question: does holding this position at this moment serve my actual long-term goals? Know when to hold ground without moving an inch. Know when to step back without regret. The man who can execute both with equal fluency is more formidable than any man who only knows one mode. Number 8. The long game. Most people make their decisions based on what feels most relieving right now, what eliminates the current discomfort most immediately, what produces the fastest visible reward. This is precisely why most people's lives look almost identical year after year. Because decisions optimized entirely for today's comfort almost always compromise tomorrow's position in ways that compound silently and become impossible to ignore only much later. The cold, calculated mindset Machiavelli described is fundamentally a long-game mindset. It doesn't ask what is easiest today. It asks what is necessary for the outcome I've committed to over the timeline that actually matters. It accepts difficulty in the present deliberately in exchange for a stronger position in the future. Here is how long-game thinking changes the quality of decisions in practice. The person playing the long game does not reveal their full capability when the stakes are low. They allow others to form underestimations, because the person who underestimates you surrenders the most valuable gift available. They lower their guard at exactly the moment you need them to. Then, when the decisive moment arrives, you exceed every expectation at the only moment that actually determines the outcome. The person playing the long game in their own development doesn't optimize for feeling satisfied with where they currently stand. They deliberately seek out the hardest available challenges and the most uncomfortable edges of their current capability, because this year's difficulty is next year's advantage. This year's comfort is next year's stagnation. The person playing the long game does not fill silence with premature movement just because waiting is uncomfortable. They hold their position with complete calm until the moment arrives that justifies action. Then they act with everything they've preserved through that patience in a single, overwhelming, decisive move. The long game requires a specific and trainable mental architecture, the ability to hold your future position in clear, detailed focus while making decisions from your current one. Most people's future remains vague, a blurry sense of eventually being successful without specific form. The long-game thinker has a precise picture of the position they're deliberately moving toward. Every daily decision gets evaluated against that picture without sentiment. Machiavelli's observation about the men who built genuinely enduring power was consistent across every example he studied. These men operated on a longer timeline than everyone around them. They were willing to be misunderstood in the short term because they could already see where the long arc of their actions was heading when nobody else could yet. Trade today's comfort for tomorrow's advantage without hesitation. Operate on a longer timeline than the people around you are thinking on, because the man who consistently chooses today's ease is building a progressively smaller life without fully realizing it. And the man who consistently trades today's difficulty for tomorrow's strength is building something that compounds year after year, choice by choice, discipline by discipline, into something that people who chose comfort will eventually find genuinely difficult to understand. Number 9, the unstoppable identity. Everything we've covered arrives here. All the cold-eyed clarity, all the calculated pauses, all the information advantages and consistency and positioning and long-game thinking. All of it serves this final and most important principle. You are building a version of yourself that cannot be dismissed, cannot be outmaneuvered, and cannot be stopped by the ordinary forces that stop ordinary men. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is confidence that isn't backed by anything real. What we're describing is earned certainty, the kind that accumulates in a man who has done the internal work consistently, built the disciplines over time, sharpened his awareness through repeated, honest observation, and constructed an identity that functions completely independent of what external conditions are currently offering him. Most men's confidence is entirely weather-dependent. When circumstances are favorable, when results are coming, when plans are working, they feel strong. When circumstances turn, when feedback becomes critical, when plans hit real obstacles, their confidence collapses. And when confidence collapses, at exactly the moment when good decisions are most necessary, that is where outcomes are lost that cannot easily be recovered. The man with an unstoppable identity does not have weather-dependent confidence. His internal stability is entirely self-generated. It comes from his relationship with his own standards, his own word to himself, his own clear sense of what he stands for and what he's building, not from what the current situation is providing or withholding. Machiavelli's observation about the greatest leaders he studied was absolutely consistent. The ones who endured, who built things that outlasted the inevitable storms that destroyed lesser constructions, were the ones who had constructed an identity that existed completely independently of what circumstances were doing to them at any given moment. They could lose a significant battle and still know exactly who they were. They could face serious criticism and still know precisely what they stood for, because their identity was a structure they had deliberately built and maintained, not a reflection of what was currently happening around them. Building this identity is a daily practice with no final completion date. It is maintained through repetition or lost through neglect. It means keeping your word to yourself in the small moments, because the small moments are where identity is actually forged. Not in the dramatic ones, in the quiet Tuesday morning when nothing external is watching and keeping the standard is harder than letting it slip. It means maintaining your discipline when it would be genuinely easier to slide. It means continuing to move forward when forward motion is genuinely difficult. It means knowing, with complete cold clarity, what you are building and exactly why. Not because someone external has approved the plan, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because you have decided, with the full weight of genuine internal authority, that this is the direction your life will take. When you have this identity fully constructed and operational, something significant shifts. The challenges that used to shake your foundation stop shaking you, because you have demonstrated to yourself enough times that you are capable of handling difficulty without losing your orientation. The doubt that used to make you hesitate at critical moments loses its grip because you have the accumulated evidence of your own consistency to argue against it with authority. You become, in the most precise and literal sense, genuinely difficult to stop. Not because nothing will ever hit you, things will still hit you. Not because the world will suddenly become easier, it won't. But because the man meeting the world's difficulty is no longer the same man who used to flinch at the first serious resistance. He has been built differently through deliberate and sustained effort. The final truth. You now understand how to develop the cold eye that sees people as they are. You know how to deploy the calculated pause that transforms your reactions into deliberate choices. You understand the information advantage that flows from listening more than you speak. You know the building force of consistent excellence. You understand the economy of trust that protects your deepest investments. You know the discipline of positioning that places you where you need to be before the need becomes visible. You understand the strategic retreat that preserves your full strength for the engagements that actually determine outcomes. You grasp the long game that trades today's comfort for tomorrow's decisive advantage. And you know the unstoppable identity, built in small invisible moments, maintained under real pressure, and ultimately independent of anything the world can take from you. They are operational frameworks. They function in every competitive arena, in every high-stakes situation, in every environment where the difference between the man who shapes events and the man who simply experiences them comes down to the quality of his thinking and the depth of his preparation. The world will test your commitment to this new way of operating almost immediately. Someone will push against your new clarity. A situation will arise that makes emotional reaction feel more satisfying than calculated response. An older pattern will reassert itself and offer you the comfortable pull of who you used to be. Hold the line. Stay cold means clear-eyed, completely free from the distortions of wishful thinking and emotional reactivity. You see what is actually there. You act on what is actually there. Stay calculated means deliberate at every level. Nothing important in your life happens by accident. Your words are chosen. Your responses are chosen. Your investments of time, energy, and trust are chosen with full awareness. You are always the author of your significant actions, never simply the product of whatever emotion happened to be loudest in that moment. Stay ahead means positioned, consistently one step further down the actual timeline than current circumstances require. You see what is coming before it arrives. You prepare before preparation becomes urgent. You arrive before the competition realizes the game has already started. This is the cold wisdom Machiavelli preserved across 5 centuries for the people willing to receive it honestly. This is the framework that permanently separates the men who are shaped by the world they encounter from the men who shape the world they operate in. This is not who you might become at some unspecified point in the future. This is who you are choosing to be right now, in this moment, with the decision to take what you've received here and make it genuinely operational in your actual life, starting today. The world has always needed men who see clearly, think carefully, prepare deliberately, and act with cold precision when the moment requires it. You are capable of being exactly that man. The only remaining question is whether you will choose to be. Stay cold, stay calculated, stay ahead. Nothing can stop what you're becoming. Go, build, lead, win.